We thought it was important to come and give you a briefing on what we've learned over the last 3 years, last 6 months especially, about data centers and energy infrastructure. And the reason is I think over the next decade, this is going to be the most influential land use change in Virginia. And so we need to learn a lot about it and learn how we can help manage that future, think about what we want to get out of the process as a community, as landowners, as Virginians. My name is Chris Miller. I'm president of PEC. I've been around for a while. This is my third round of transmission line and big infrastructure projects while I've been with PEC. So we've learned a little bit along the way, but frankly, this issue caught us by surprise. Because the scale and the scope for the global nature of what Virginia is experiencing. So if you don't take away anything else from tonight, that global concentration of data centers and the energy they require is exceptional. Something between 50 and 70% of all data centers in the world are going to be built in Virginia. Many of them have already been built, more are coming. And the energy that they require is changing our landscape. That's the big picture. This is something that's we've been decided was going to be part of our strategic plan for the next 5 years while pursuing our mission, which has not changed. We're still dedicated to our work in conservation, community planning, trying to make the Piedmont a wonderful model for the rest of the world in terms of sustainable development. We work in 9 counties. We provide sort of full suite of services in community organizing and conservation. But we also work in a much bigger area in the sort of northern half of the state down to Richmond and are very familiar with land use and conservation trends. We've got a lot of folks here today from our staff here in Charlottesville. Don works in Green in Orange and Madison County. Peter works in the city of Charlottesville, mostly on land use and transportation. Kim is our lead on land conservation. Rob is the lead on planning in Albemarle County. Faith Umet is our communication staff. And I hope you all know Nora Solheimer, who's in the back. She's our director of advancement for PEC. Lives down here in Albemarle County. We also have Marco Sanchez is here, part of our communications team, and Lisi Dark Hodges, who's part of our strategic planning and advancement team. So we're here intentionally because this is a big issue, and we want to answer any questions you have. We want to make sure you know that this is something we're very focused on in Albemarle County. So we have a short video which we think helps summarize the issues, and will make the rest of the slides make more sense. So this is available on YouTube if you want to see it at your leisure. We thought it was a good way to start.
Virginia is undergoing profound economic, environmental, and technological changes, all centered around the activities of one industry: data centers. Data centers are the backbone of our modern technological world. They enable everything from watching Netflix on our TVs to huge companies training artificial intelligence models. Northern Virginia has the largest concentration of data centers anywhere in the world, and while there has been some financial benefit to particular localities, the explosive growth of this industry is bringing massive costs and risks that will fall on the people and environment of the state and region as a whole. We need to start taking account of these hidden costs and stop subsidizing the infrastructure needs of the biggest corporations in the world.
Okay, so a data center is part of what makes our digital world in the 21st century work. It's usually a large concrete building filled with servers, and those servers are what processes and stores and transmits our data that we're using every day.
The photos from your phone or the videos or any of those things that show up on that device, a lot of that computing power is elsewhere.
Everything is held in those big concrete boxes, and so when you save something in the cloud, it's not in the sky. Whoever came up with that, genius.
Northern Virginia already has the largest concentration of data centers in the world. At the moment, it's home to just about half of all US facilities. And yet the data center market here is still growing faster than anywhere else in the world, driven in large part by the boom of artificial intelligence. With these new facilities comes a huge increase in demand for energy upgrades, extensive acreage, and lots of water to operate. This explosive growth is threatening to derail our efforts to meet critical climate goals, maintain reliable and affordable power, protect air and water quality and state and national parks, and to conserve land.
Data center development's been going on in our area for a long time. It really wasn't concerning initially because we had planned for the growth in an area that already had existing infrastructure for that growth. But recently, during the pandemic, we saw a much faster growth rate of data center development.
Well, a big announcement for Louisa County today. Amazon Web Services will build a pair of new data centers there.
Yeah, total investment, about $11 billion, billion with a B.
In Virginia itself, there's over 300 data centers, and in Loudoun County in particular, on the east side in Data Center Alley, we have close to 150, 160 data centers, with more in the pipeline for approval. There's not really a comprehensive policy on any level that's looking at the cumulative impact of these data centers.
The on-the-ground impact of data centers is the land that they take up, but it's also the electrical infrastructure to power them.
Data centers use a staggering amount of electricity. New proposals are averaging between 60 and 90 megawatts per facility. For scale, a single 60 megawatt data center building will use the same amount of electricity as roughly 15,000 households. Even if a data center's large roof were covered with solar panels, it would only produce a small fraction of the power needed. When data centers are proposed in Virginia, their applications are considered and approved solely by the county, city, or town that they'll be built in. The locality considers each application individually on its merits, how much tax revenue it'll generate, how it will look, the specifics of its design, and then they make a decision. Taken individually, a single new data center might not seem like it has far-reaching impacts, but one has to look at all of the facilities being approved across the region together to get a true sense of their total cost. However, there is nobody at the state or federal level keeping track of all the proposals and the cumulative impact that dozens or even hundreds more data centers will have as they come online.
So as much as data centers will say that they're carbon neutral, their existence puts a lot of different renewable energy goals at risk. Most places energy usage is going down or staying flat because of increased energy efficiency. In Virginia, it is spiking up and doubling, and that's solely as a result of data centers.
Over the next 15 years, Dominion forecasts that it will need to produce twice as much power as it currently does, nearly an additional 23 gigawatts, in order to cover the demand of current and future data centers. That is equivalent to more than 5.5 million households, or 12 North Anna nuclear plants worth of additional power, just for data centers.
And now what we're seeing is this increased demand is not going to be filled with renewable energy. It's in fact going to be built with natural gas facilities. And so rather than taking natural gas offline and coal offline to reach our renewable energy goals by 2050, what we're seeing now is Dominion is now talking about opening a new plant in Chesterfield, for example, and increasing amounts of projects that are, really counterintuitive in terms of climate change and in terms of Virginia reaching its clean energy goals. I think for folks such as myself, I have 2 young kids. All of these things are interconnected, and we need to really get a sense of what that impact is, because it's particularly for younger folks, it's going to be a part of their future.
So who's paying for all of this? In Virginia, upgrades to the electrical grid, namely transmission lines, substations, and generation facilities, are not paid for by the specific company that requires the upgrade, but instead by all Dominion ratepayers. That's you, me, our neighbors. When we pay our electric bills each month, we are giving a direct subsidy to multi-billion-dollar companies like Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Apple. I don't know about you, but that doesn't really feel fair.
We are up against an industry worth trillions that have insinuated themselves in every level of government.
These are some of the biggest companies in the world, and we're sacrificing our air quality, our water quality, our recreational facilities, and we're also building the infrastructure that they need to support their industries on our back. We're giving all of this to them even though they're the richest corporations in the world.
In every single way, data center development goes from a micro to a macro level. And people need to understand that the risk is to everyone, whether it happens to be next door to you or not.
Our world increasingly revolves around data. We produce and store more and more of it each year. We can all try to make individual decisions to reduce the real-world impact of our digital footprint, but the use of data is a modern reality. As new technologies that require ever-increasing amounts of computing power are developed, the key question is how can we ensure that this is done sustainably? There's very little regulatory oversight of this industry, and we know that there is so much at risk. Unless higher sustainability standards and more oversight are put in place, today's soaring demand for computing power will inflict huge costs on our society and our environment.
Hopefully that gives you sort of an overview, sense of the scale. The imagery is all shot in Virginia. That's our own staff using drones to capture what's going on in Loudon, Prince William. So, you know, this is homegrown material, and I would say that there's nothing like that video anywhere in the world yet. So, please watch it on YouTube and share it with your friends. I think it's a good summary. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the transmission lines that are proposed that affect Albemarle County and surrounding areas, where the demand for those lines comes from, what the projections are into the future, and some thoughts about what we can all do about making this a better process. All of us are tied into a complicated infrastructure around transmission and distribution of electricity. The trend is to electrify everything, so this is going to be more and more how we're all interconnected. These graphics are pretty standard. They're actually from Dominion. But we wanted to give you sort of a frame of reference. 1 megawatt is equal to 250 homes. Gigawatts, 1,000 megawatts. So the math starts to multiply out. And I think what was surprising to everyone was how a small, something the size of a Walmart could be as much as 300 megawatts of power. Just the scale of how much energy is flowing through all those computers. This is a graphic just to show those interconnections. The things we're realizing at the local level is the effect on things like parks and trails because of the proximity of these facilities, the amount of water that they're consuming. They recycle some, but it's probably less than 25%. And what they don't recycle has a lot of materials in it that we don't really want in our water systems. There's serious air quality issues associated with not only the reliance on generation from fossil fuel plants, but the backup generators that are used for emergency purposes. 95% of the ones in Virginia are diesel fueled. Some of the dirtiest emissions that you can imagine in the modern era. There's 11.8 gigawatts of diesel generation in Northern Virginia alone. A lot. So they all turned on at once, we'd have an air quality problem just from those generators. The effect on habitat, on conservation lands, how they affect community design because of the increasing size and scale of the buildings. And they just approved one in Fairfax County and Chantilly about 110 feet high. So these are things that are starting to loom over surrounding neighborhoods. And then, of course, the most visible part is the transmission infrastructure all around the state. This is a map you won't find anywhere except for on our website. These are the 72 transmission projects proposed by utilities and transmission construction companies to meet a problem set out by an organization named PJM. You ever heard of PJM? The one person does PJM. 2, 3, you're admitting it. The secret society, like Skull and Bones, PJM. You have to be a utility to be a member. And so the utilities in the Mid-Atlantic region out to Chicago work together on auctioning generation power, managing interstate grid, and they have an overseeing body called PJM. PJM called for solutions to a deficit of about 7.5 gigawatts of power demand in Loudoun County in 2022. So existing facilities and the shortfall that was already being built into the system of 7.5 gigawatts. Remember, North Anna is 1.8 gigawatts. So somewhere between 3 and 4 North Anna's worth of power deficit. And these are the 72 projects that were proposed. Look at this map and remember this map, and we'll make sure to share this map, because these are projects that may come back in the next few years. What they decided on December 12th to solve that problem were these 4 projects. One running from the Ohio River Valley, connecting coal resources in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. One to some decommissioned plants in Delaware, and then an upgrade of the lines running through Albemarle County. And so, just be very aware, this is to take advantage of existing generation capacity. These are plants that were starting to be phased out, and that's why we concluded that this is a threat to our carbon goals. And as we zoom in, I wanted Rob to come up and tell you a little bit about what's proposed here in Albemarle, Charlottesville. This line running from Waynesboro sort of across Albemarle County and then up through Southwest Mountains and Desert.
Thank you, Chris. So on this map, you're oriented to some degree. This isn't going to work, but you can see Charlottesville in the middle there. Those are existing 230 kilovolt lines that are running right now from Gordonsville along the Southwest Mountains. There's a line that goes through Stony Point to Hollymead, and then the rest of it goes all the way through Crozet over to Dooms and the Shenandoah Valley across the Blue Ridge. And then it's important, this is going back to what Chris was talking about. You can see this line right here, that's new, and it feeds off into Louisa. And you'll see in a few minutes, when I talk about Louisa County, what's going on there. That project is not active now, but there's no reason to believe that it may not come back in the future. So those are the 2 major locations. And then this project up here that goes, there you can see Garth Road going up, that piece up there also could be a future project. So this is what we're looking at, and these are the kinds of structures. So some of the impacts that we're talking about and what we're looking at are visual impacts for sure. During construction impacts, that project that you're looking at is called a wreck and rebuild. So they're proposing to rebuild those lines. Some of them will include removing towers. What are we looking at, Chris? These are probably 500 and 760.
That's 230 on Route 7.
230 on Route 7, kilovolt. So just to give you a sense of scale, the 500 kilovolt towers right there, that's about 250 feet tall. So we're talking about a wreck and rebuild of existing 230 kilovolt line. That's the sort of pinkish system that you see off to the right. So they're going to work. We don't know a lot of detail. There's a lot of redacted information that is being held back for proprietary reasons. We just don't know a lot of details. But what they're talking about is going through that same alignment that you see there and actually rebuilding lines. It may be rebuilt the first out of the box by 2028 as a 230 kilovolt, but there's a potential for a 500 kilovolt. What that means is taller towers, which would have more impact in terms of visual impacts and other kinds of impacts during construction. And right now they're talking about $238 million and completion by 2028. So why does this matter? It matters for these reasons. The rural economy. This county, only 5% is in the developed area, 95% is in the rural area. And what's in that rural area? And I'm going to show you a map, a series of maps of what we're looking at in terms of those impacts. But we all understand the beauty and the natural resources and the tourism. It's all related, and it's also where people live. So this is just a reminder. The red line is the project we're talking about. What we're showing you is 3 miles on either side, a buffer. And that's not the exact, what they call the visual area of potential effect, but essentially for the purposes of this, we wanted to show you what kind of resources are in this corridor. So, National Scenic Byways. We're talking about crossing Skyline Drive again, and also Journey Through Hallowed Ground, which is a National Heritage Area. There's 2 routes that are affected. Those are internationally significant resources. And what you're looking at, all the kind of orangey color, that's the viewshed from those routes. From the Journey Through Hallowed Ground routes, that's the viewshed. And then we have state scenic roads as well. We have state scenic rivers designated. You can see those. Land under conservation easement, and it's important to point out, you don't get a conservation easement for any land. It has to have certain values to qualify for a conservation easement. So every one of those green polygons is speaking to the natural resource values, historic resource values that are worthy of protection. And then publicly owned land, including the Appalachian Trail, local parks, you can see county parks, and then what you're looking at here are lands that are in that corridor that are visible from the overlooks on Skyline Drive. So if you go up to those overlooks and you look down, that's what's visible. And then these are historic resources. So there's the Southwest Mountains Rural Historic District that it runs right through. Monticello, which is a World Heritage Site along with the University of Virginia. Then you're talking about the Greenwood-Afton Rural. Those are National Register Rural Historic Districts with national significance, state significance, and local significance. And then there's any number of historic properties that are affected as well. And then here's the viewshed for Monticello. This is from the county's viewshed mapping. And so it certainly is going to be visible.
Again, all these materials will be available. We'll send them out to you by email, so you can look at them more closely when you go home. So where is this all coming from? This is the grid that is managed by PJM. It's coming from the interrelated resources that bring electricity around the Mid-Atlantic, but into Virginia to meet demand for data centers. It's literally a consortium of utilities, and these are the different territories that are participating in the PJM planning processes. Dominion Energy controls the transmission grid for our part of the world, even though you might be a co-op customer. The transmission is being provided mostly by Dominion. And this is the request for proposals that came from PJM of requesting the 7.5 gigawatts worth of power. Something big going on. We don't have all those answers, but we think it's important, and I think it's important to work together. One of the things we've started to do is track in more detail the locations of the data centers. This is an early map we found that Dominion provided, working with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. But we've added to that. C.B. Richard Ellis has done an analysis comparing data centers in Virginia, Northern Virginia, with the rest of the world. So that 50 to 70% of global computing, this is where that number comes from. And highlight sort of way off to the right is Silicon Valley. You may think that's where data centers are, but they're not. They're here. This is actually just available inventory. This is not the future. This is current. The proposals are getting bigger. The intensity of electricity use is multiplying exponentially. We're now seeing pretty regularly 30 to 90 megawatt facilities, but actually what's being advertised as available are more in the 300 megawatt range. Each building has that capacity. We started tracking this. This is sort of a crowdsourced project where we've asked a network of local organizations and volunteers to let us know when they have an application in their community. We started adding them all up, whether they're approved, whether they're in the process. And the numbers are quite startling. The total current load from existing data centers is about 2.1, 2.3 gigawatts. Total approved but unbuilt is another 7.8 to 23. That's the doubling. But what's scary is their applications already in process all across Virginia for another 16 to 48 gigawatts. So we get to 60 pretty quickly. 60 gigawatts is the size of France. Entire power consumption of France in Virginia for one industry. That's the equivalent of 12 million homes. How many homes are in Virginia today? Anybody know? 3.8 million. Right? So that's just to give you a sense of scale. In 2022, early in the year, outgoing Secretary of Natural Resources and Secretary of Energy presented a report on decarbonization to the General Assembly. And what they said in 2022 is, but for data centers and electric vehicles, Virginia would have declining power consumption. Electric vehicles really brings you to flat. So most of the growth, 90 to 100%, is from the data center industry. So that's our first inkling, is 2022. This is the scale going forward. This is total energy consumption, not peak load. There's a similar, more dramatic, actually, graph that shows the jump in peak load that comes from the data center industry. It's unprecedented. We're seeing levels of growth approaching 5% per annum on a compound quarterly basis. And that's been reported to PJM is the basis for their modeling of what the transmission needs. Did that go up?
Yeah. Let's try this other one.
So, double. Importance of planning. Right now, the planning process is as described in the video. The company comes to a local government, asks for land use permission to build a big facility, and that's it. There's no state energy impact analysis. There's no consideration of water consumption other than by the local entity. So it's your local governments that are making the decision, sort of the tail wagging the dog, because the results of this is a transformation of the state's energy system and then the communities that host it. One rather startling example was approved by Prince William County on December 12th of 2023. This map, which our staff had to put together with basically the tape on their floor and then take a picture of it, because there was no consolidated representation of the land use out of 5,000 pages of documents that were submitted for 30 million square feet of data center development in Prince William County, directly adjacent to the Manassas National Battlefield. This is Digital Gateway. Projected demand is somewhere in the range of 3 gigawatts, but I think it's probably bigger than that. And it's just an example of what is happening right now at the local level that we need to get on top of. We've got a new set of proposals in Louisa, and Rob's going to tell you about those and some of them in Albemarle Green.
So, several months ago, Chris, senior management, we're hearing about data centers up in Loudoun County, Fauquier, Prince William. We're down here in Albemarle, and I'm like scratching my head. Data centers? I haven't heard anything about data centers down here. Then I saw this. $11 billion in Louisa County for 2 data center campuses, not just 2 data centers, with a total of up to 20 to 25 data centers total. So what Louisa County did was basically create a technology overlay district that basically was set up to accommodate, not exclusively, but to accommodate these data center proposals. So obviously, Amazon Web Services had been talking with Louisa County for some time. And both of these projects, one is right next to Lake Anna because of water, and another one, the larger one, is next to another reservoir location. There's also transmission lines that they need, and there'll be more likely to feed into this. So why these 2 projects are the ones that we're looking at in the county. Again, these are screenshots, and this is what PJM is telling us why they need the wreck and rebuild going to the county. Required for reliability needs, future load growth in Culpeper and Louisa area. So these lines aren't just being built to serve what's going on in Albemarle County, but maybe there's other reasons that could be about Albemarle County, and that we don't know for sure. Now, this is Ravenna Station Futures, and if you don't know what this is, up on the upper right-hand side is 3 Department of Defense facilities. Now, I get quoted and misquoted in the press. We're not opposing the Department of Defense facilities. That's not what this is about for us. We want good planning and good design. There's 426 acres that's associated with this, and you'll see why I'm bringing this up. So, Ravenna Station Futures, this is Holly Reed and Ravenna Station right there. There were actually a pink line going to a substation on 29 North, and that line linked all the way into Greene County. Greene County's comp plan was just completed, and in it they have a new land use characterization, or a district that's new, and it's set up specifically to, in part, accommodate growth from Ravenna Station Futures. So we're connecting the dots here, and we might be wrong. We don't know, but that spur that goes over from the main line over to Hollymead, we're asking questions, and we're hoping to get answers. We don't have all the answers, but we're starting to look at this and wonder what's going on. So this is a quote from a presentation on Ravenna Station Futures that was made to a planning commission during a work session. This is made by a deputy county executive, and basically Mr. Henry's saying that they saw the potential for development from the North Fork of the Ravenna River all the way up to Greene County, approximately 8 miles, with the possibility of realizing a level of potential similar to Silicon Valley at its onset. Those are his words. You know, this isn't in the comprehensive plan conversation. And we're, again, connecting the dots to what does this have to do with transmission and the potential for data centers. So it's my job to deal with land use in this county. So I went to the zoning ordinance and I did a word search for data center. The only place, those are the 3 search results right there, and really it's only under a definition. So I have a working relationship with county staff. I reach out to senior county planning staff and I said, if a data center comes into Albemarle County, how will you all address that? Where does it go? Is it a by right use somewhere? I did this search, and the answer was, great question. They were earnest. We need to talk to the county attorney and the zoning administrator, and I'm looking forward to that conversation so we can understand better how this county will address it. I mean, this county has a progressive, generally progressive planning staff and a large one. So we're just hoping that we can have that conversation.
So this is the last bit. Where is Dominion going to get all this power from? These are from their own plans. This is from the Integrated Resource Plan they filed in May of 2023. This is a graph from that document. The top white bar is transmission supplied from out of the area. The tan is new fossil fuel. The green is new storage. The yellow is new solar. And the blue is wind. And this is the existing supply. This is already causing impacts in Virginia and Chesterfield. And then the fiscal impact of this is pretty significant. Part of the Integrated Resource Plan was the projection of the net present value cost of the different scenarios. And the range is 110 billion to 150, 140. So that's their initial cost estimate. What does that mean, right? 140 billion over 15 years. Is that a lot? Well, they're starting to file notices in local papers for a rate increase in the coming years to accommodate those plans. This is what those advertisements say. So this is from Dominion. The average monthly bill will increase by more than 100%. So if your bill is $200 a month, I don't know, just making it up, and it doubles to $400, that $200 extra a month, just $2,400 a year over 20 years, that's $40,000. That's a direct subsidy from you to the data center operator. But for them, you wouldn't need the transmission. They're asking you to pay for it. And it's in Dominion's own documents. So this, we think, is earth-shattering news. I don't think there's been a lot of reporting on it. It's in the public domain. And our elected officials told us this week in the General Assembly that they're willing to study it for a couple of years, but they're not ready to take action yet. You would think that a doubling of the tax rate, the rate for your electricity would be worthy of immediate action, but apparently not. So, we're starting to dig in on those things, and then a lot comes with that. So what do we do about it? Well, we have to be aware that all these different elements are part of the equation, and then we need to think about how to improve the situation. First, we need better planning. We need to monitor these things. We need to have a state database. We need to understand the energy demand that we're approving before we approve it. 20 years ago, we used to allow local governments to change their land use plans without any regard to the effect on the state transportation network. Passed legislation around 2002 that required traffic impact analysis. And that was a direct response from the fact that localities were wagging the tail wagging the dog and leaving the bill to the state. Same situation here. You have localities making decisions and leaving the bill to the ratepayers, and that needs to change. We need to do energy impacts analysis before local decisions are made. We need greater transparency in the process. Many of these deals are being negotiated in secret using non-disclosure agreements. Many of them are government facilities, so there are some national security situations that are perfectly reasonable, but most of them are not. And so, this is a scale of impacts that doesn't need to be done in the dark. That's a big change that needs to happen. We need to adopt standards for energy consumption, water use, for noise. We have none at the state level. We don't have it at the national level. We don't have it at the local level. Frontier has adopted a new ordinance. It's pretty stringent. But this is all work in progress. These are things we can work on in each of our communities. We're working on it in the General Assembly. We can work on it at the national level as well. Shifting the costs to the industry, I think, is absolutely critical in order to motivate them to use less energy. And then in all of this thing, we need to think about the ways we can mitigate the impacts that we can't avoid. If we're going to triple the number of transmission lines running through Virginia, that's a lot of impact on a lot of land, a lot of employees, and a lot of conservation resources. And we need to think about new ways of capturing the cost of those impacts and getting some resources out of the process to help mitigate those, to offset them. How many of you have ever heard of the Land and Water Conservation Fund? One or two? Anyone want to tell us where the money comes from that funds that? Anybody know? No, not from taxes. No, it's federal. It's a royalty on offshore drilling in the United States. In response to the oil spills of the 60s off of Catalina Island, there's a realization that if you're going to continue to do offshore drilling, you've got to have some mechanism for making up for those impacts. And that source of funds created the Land and Water Conservation Fund, about $40 billion over the last 40, 50 years, of which only $18 billion has been spent. So there's, no, 22 billion has been spent, there's still 18 billion. One of those two, I can't remember. Point is there's a fund from royalties that is now providing $900 million a year for land conservation around the country. Pretty good idea. So if you have $140 billion infrastructure improvements for one industry, you take, say, a 10% excise on that. That goes into a fund that's then available for impacts, to offset the impacts on communities and conservation across the state. That's a $14 billion fund that could probably help us achieve our community development and conservation goals. And that might be a good first step. These are new ideas, these are big ideas, but we're dealing with something which is concentrating all of the impacts of a global resource. These are the computers that are running the economy all over the world in the AI. And we're dealing with 100% of the impacts, but we're not getting anything in return other than local tax revenue. So this is a big imbalance that we need to think about how to address. So what are we doing about it? Well, we have a state coalition. It's called the Virginia Data Center Reform Coalition. You're welcome to join. About 100 of us were in the General Assembly on Wednesday last week. And these are folks from all over the Commonwealth, mostly Northern Virginia, but increasingly all over the Commonwealth, calling for these reasonable steps. 17 bills were introduced to address this issue. I think all but 3 have been killed in the Senate study. And you're going to have to get mobilized in order to get the General Assembly to act in the next session. We were able to get the conservation community as a whole to adopt this as one of its priorities. Virginia Conservation Network's common agenda includes our recommendations for legislative change. Policy recommendations are set out. That's a document to share with you. We tried to specifically address the energy issue. And so, if nothing else, we've done a lot of education and information sharing in the General Assembly this year. We've got, 30-40% of the members of the General Assembly are new. We only knew who they were, really, in November. So we did the best we could between November and January. We've got work to do. Next session, we're going to try to get these bills actually enacted. There is going to be an independent study by the Joint Legislative Audit Review Commission. That's Virginia's equivalent to the Congressional Research Service. They're very good staff. They've been empowered. They've already met with us, which was really a shock. The first week they started their outlining of studies, they actually contacted us and sat down with us for half a day to go through issues they should research in more detail. So those are things that are already underway. What can you do? Well, we hope you will stay informed. We'll keep you updated with the best information. It's important to reach out to state and local officials and ask them what they're going to do. Most of them don't understand this issue at all. Most of them haven't watched that video. Most of them haven't seen these slides. There's a big learning curve. All of us went through it. We had no idea how big this is. And that's a big first step. So you can help with that. You can share it just in your neighborhood. We're happy to come and do additional presentations. But frankly, we've tried to make all this information on the web. All those maps are on our website. They're interactive. You can zoom in and zoom out, turn on different layers, so you can do a lot of this research yourself.